Okay, in this video we're going to look at solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So this is an example that we've looked at now by factoring. We factored this thing nicely. It's a nice factorable problem. And it actually factors down to x minus 7 times x plus 1. Your answer ends up being 7 or negative 1 really quickly. So you want to use factoring if you can and if you have a chance. But let's show that we get the same answer using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula was shown as just derived from the standard form of any quadratic equation. And so as long as you can identify A, B, and C correctly, then you'll get the answer correct and simplify correctly. It's not the easiest sometimes. You got to simplify correctly too. So it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's the standard form, and so that's where you identify your A, B, and C. Make sure everything's all on one side and do that correctly. So let's do that right off the bat. Let's identify what my A is, what my B is, and what my C is, and then plug it in. And the simplification part of it can be tricky sometimes, so you really have to be careful. X is equal to opposite of B, so it's going to be a positive 6 plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2a. Let's simplify this down. 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 plus 28 all over 2. So we'll keep going. And we'll have x to equal 6 plus or minus the square root of, let's see, we're going to end up with what, let's see, this is 64, yeah, 64, all over 2. So x is going to equal, this is perfect square factor, so that tells me it would have factored. This is going to be 6 plus or minus square root of 64 is 8 all over 2, so you have two answers. X is going to equal 6 plus 8 over 2, which will be 14 over 2, or x is going to equal 6 minus 8, which is negative 2 over 2. So you'll end up getting 7 for an answer, or negative 1. So there's your two answers. Much quicker by factoring, right? I mean, but most things don't factor, so we need another method. And this is a great method, as just the simplification part of it can be real tricky, really picky with signs, so be real careful. Watch your signs. I picked another one here to show, and this also, I think, completing the square sometimes can even be easier since A is 1 and this is even. Might have been easier to do than we showed how to do that with that one versus this quadratic formula. But if you get good with quadratic formula, you can solve any quadratic equation actually. So if we look at this, I go, cool. I look at this, it almost looks like it'd be factorable. It's not. So I'm going to identify this. A is 1, B is negative 8, and C is negative 16. Now, me personally, if I had choice, I would use completing the square for this one. This thing does not factor, really close, but does not factor, so I had actually picked completing the square, reason being that's 1 and that's even. So half of that is 4 squared 16. I'd add 16 to both sides, send that over. I just think it's quicker and easier, but if you don't want to learn an extra method, you never have to really use completing the square if you can get this down. A lot of people just avoid completing the square in general. So to do this one anyways, let's plug this in, make sure everything's all on one side. It is in this case again. If the 16 was over here, I'd have to bring it over before I could do that. Now I'm going to just say x is equal to negative b, which is positive 8 in this case, negative 8 squared b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's simplify this thing down. I get 8 plus or minus square root of 64 plus 64, looks like, all over 2. So x will equal 8 plus or minus square root of 128, or 64 times 2. 8 plus or minus square root of 64 times 2. Why I said that is because I want perfect square factors to come out. You want to reduce this thing. And so you'll end up doing this. Hopefully you can see this on the video. And x is equal to 8 plus or minus 8 root 2, because the square root of 64 is 8, all over 2, and then individually divide the 2 into each of your 8s, and you should get 4 plus or minus 4 root 2. That's the only simplified exact radical solution for both of those. So, and you can run across complex number answers too. If I had a negative underneath the root symbol, you just pull your eye out, and so it's the same thing as completing the square. We did a few of those, but it's a method that always works. But just really watch for, if I gave you the problem initially like this, x squared minus 8x equals 16, send that 16 over to the left side. You got to have everything on the left side so it's in the standard form before you identify A, B, and C. So you have the signs correct. That's a real common mistake. And then the hardest part is signs in here. Watch that. It's always opposite of B. So if B is negative 8, that'll be positive 8. Watch for a simplification side of here is tricky, and but that's using the quadratic formula, and it works for all. It doesn't have to be factorable, and it's a great method to use, especially when the ones when they do not factor. This is not a 1, and this is not even. Then you definitely want to use quadratic formula, I think, to solve these. So, and that's it.